Hey, what's going on, everybody? Brenny, welcome back to the gym, my man. 12 months. Holy crow, you're a year old, and you're looking great for the effort, buddy. Appreciate everything that you've done. Brenny, you're going to love our guest today, Andy Skrzynski. He's been on the stream once before, guys and girls. He has been on, shared a little bit about his kind of like an autobiography type book. He'll talk a little bit about it today. I hope I'll pull him down that road and see if we can explore a little bit about what we talked about before. And then I got a whole series of questions I want to ask Andy, particularly about the writing process. I think it's fascinating to me how somebody can sit down and articulate in writing the thoughts that go into a book of any form or fashion, whether it be an autobiography, a fiction piece, or some other form of a book. And I'm curious to see today, particularly how we go along, if you guys have any input or questions or anything. He's not going to be able to necessarily see the chat, but I will feed them over to Andy today. He is really excited to get together and to chat about this again with us. I felt when we spoke last time, and I think he did too, that we just weren't done yet. We really wanted to have another conversation with him to arrive at a place where we felt like we accomplished the full job, not just the start of one. So I'm happy to have Andy back, and I pray that you guys will journey along with us in full detail and in a way that honors Andy and his work, his body of work, actually. So it's pretty exciting. I'm going to move some things around on my screens here, so I apologize if you see me kind of looking off screen a couple times. I just want to make sure I can see everything as we go along here, because I'm going to have a million screens open. So I got all my questions written down because, risks to prepare. I do the things ahead of time. I make sure I got my questions, and I don't want to leave the great and amazing Andy Skrzynski hanging with, me fumbling about. So I've done some homework. Let's see here. How was everyone's week? We haven't really I've talked to some of you guys and girls. Risk prepared. The question is asked by Brenny. Come on now. I get out in front of things. Hey, Anna Forrest. I haven't seen you in a long time. How you doing? Thanks for coming back into the stream. I saw you the other day. Whose stream was it in that I saw you? It was great to catch you in a stream. Week has been steady. Can't wait for Friday to chill, though. Yeah. Hey, Smelly Morg. Come on now. Be nice to me. I showered. Well, let's get into it. Let's go say hi to Andy, see what he's up to. I think Andy's on a Zoom call. We're going to pull him in. And, again, I encourage all of you to get in, listen to the conversation we're having, ask clarifying questions. Well, Anna, seeing as you're not on Twitch much anymore, I'm glad that you're spending some time here with us today. It's exciting to have you back in the stream. Thank you for joining me. Let's get Andy in here. Andy, we lost you. Where'd you go? Get back on your screen.
I'm on here.
You're on
Can
here.
you hear me?
I can hear you, but I don't see you.
Well, I can see me, so what do you need to do? What do I need to do?
Oh, nothing. It's probably something on my end. I got to fiddle.
I'm here. I can see me on my screen.
I got to fiddle around. Well, we can hear you. So while I can hear you. So what have you been up to, Andy? How you been?
I've been doing great. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to everybody.
Yeah.
It's pretty busy since the last time we talked in July of the summer here.
Yeah.
And shortly after we had that interview, I held my book signing in Jackson, Michigan. And that went exceptionally well. It was even better than what I had anticipated and discussed in the last interview. Even with COVID and all the restrictions and the concerns that people had, there were still 165 people that attended the book signing in Jackson, and I was able to sell 227 books, 175 of the orphanage books, and 52 of my science fiction trilogy. So it went really well.
So COVID didn't have a really negative effect on your ability to have your meeting then?
Well, it hampered some because I know some people said they weren't going to attend because they were a little bit frightened.
Yeah.
We applied all the restrictions that they had in Michigan during the book signing. So we kept it safe. We had masks and stuff like that during book signing.
Yeah.
But there's still a lot of people that were afraid. That didn't affect the book sales because those people just simply ordered directly from me, and I mailed them a signed copy. So that wasn't a problem.
Nice.
So in person we had 165 people show up, and I let's see here, I sold 109 books that were purchased directly from me.
Hi,
That were
MLA. How are
signed
you?
copies. And also the neat thing too was that 19 people, followers, bought books and donated them to nursing homes, youth havens, and school libraries there in the Jackson area. And I was able to also gift
Wow.
27 books to family and followers who had contributed to the story itself.
Mm-hmm.
So that, turned out really well. So Amazon book sales continue to move along steadily, even to this day. I also have in process a audiobook. Found a great narrator who's working on an audiobook to tell the story of Andy Jr. and the orphanage experiences that he had. And I'm anticipating right around May of 2021 that I'll have an audiobook available too. A lot of the people that are following me, well, not a lot, but there's a handful of people that are following me that are legally blind and have asked for something other than the textual book. So that's why one of the reasons I'm, hurrying to get an audiobook available as well.
That's fun.
Last year, exactly on this date, December 16th, I created my author page on Facebook. And that is where I started sharing my story as I was writing the manuscript. And I actually ended up, I think the last time we talked and had an interview, I had 740 members. And I kind of thought after I published the book and had book signings that I'd probably lose membership because, people might lose interest, but it's actually been growing. I've got 850 followers now. And they love the book for various reasons.
Yeah.
Some have said that they really appreciate that the story came out when it did because of all the COVID restrictions and having to be stuck at home.
Yeah.
They felt that the positive messages that were being relayed through the story helped them get through some really tough times.
You guys can hear Andy okay?
In fact, one lady just yesterday from England, she wrote a note to me and said,
you can see him and hear him
you
good
don't
now?
know just how much your book is helping people. She said her house just burned down just a couple months ago to the ground. And she said as she was reading this story, the book helped her get through her darkest hour.
Awesome. Thank you, MLA.
She thanked me for,
MLA, thank you for the 400 bits as well.
So that's one of those heartfelt moments that just warms your heart and, brings tears to your eyes that, your story is actually helping people out there.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys. Yeah, that's awesome, Andy. So I mean, I guess, so does stuff like that, does that help inspire you for some of your stories in your books, like life experiences, or is this just, I mean, where do you get your ideas from for your books? Like, because I guess the first thing is explain what your books are. Explain, I think you got a picture of one. We can switch cameras and have a look at one of your books.
Yeah, I'll switch right now. Okay, this is the last book I wrote, the one that I'm talking about, the orphanage book.
Yeah.
Andy and the St. Joseph Home for Boys. Okay, and it's got a picture of the orphanage down at the bottom there of the book and my name. But that was a huge mansion. And at the time that I was there, it housed 50 boys.
Yeah.
There were about a dozen nuns that were operating the orphanage at that time that I was there.
So now that, just for clarification, that orphanage was actually in the town that I live right now. Because you lived, as a young man, you lived here.
Yes, I lived there. I was born in Mercy Hospital there in Jackson, Michigan.
Yeah.
Which is actually only about a block and a half away from the orphanage. Mm-hmm. But my family actually lived in the Spring Arbor area. Mm-hmm. So that's where I grew up for the first 5 years before my childhood, you might say, was abruptly interrupted.
Upended a little bit, yeah.
And our family, my mom and dad decided to get a divorce. And then my mom tried to take care of us, but things were really tough in those days in the early 1960s, late 1950s. Yeah. A woman trying to find a good job to be able to take care of 3 very young kids. I mean, I was only 5, my brother was 4, and my sister was 2. So she tried, but then after a little while, she realized she wasn't going to be able to do it, so she gave up custody to our dad. Yeah. Now, our dad was working full time. And working overtime at times. And there were no child care centers back in those days. Okay, you didn't just go down to the corner and drop the kids off and then you go to work and then come back and pick them up. There was no such thing as that. Either your family helped out, and in this case, our grandmother, who we called Bata because we were Polish, she took care of our sister, who was 2. But Bata was already in her 60s, approaching 70s, so while she could take care of Vicky and wanted to, there was no way she could take care of all 3 of us, especially 2 boys, ran bunch of little boys. So
yeah.
That's when they decided to put us in the orphanage.
Yeah.
In 1960.
Yeah, and that facility was originally, I mean, it may be 4 blocks from where I'm at now, probably as the crow flies, maybe a mile and a half from our facility here in Jackson.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not far at all.
No. In fact, we used to, in my first 3 years of being there at the orphanage, I went to St. John's, which is right around the corner from where you're at.
Yeah, right around the corner.
Yeah, and we used to walk to and from. I mean, there was no buses in those days, and St. John's was about an hour. I'm sorry, a mile away from the house. So we walked to and from. And you didn't, in those days, you didn't really worry about whether somebody's going to kidnap you or anything like that. That kind of stuff didn't happen back in those days.
Different world. So this is the one book. What are the other books that we got, Andy? Because you've got more than one book.
Oh, yeah. Before I even wrote the orphanage book, back in 2015, I started writing a trilogy, basically science fiction adventure kind of story about the
trilogy.
Future. And the first book,
there it is.
Okay, so this book is called The New World: A Step Backward. Okay.
So Andy, I don't remember writing the contract, but clearly you've used my picture on the cover of that book. I thank you, but
yeah, the one with the blonde hair in the background there with the bow and arrow. Yes, you're exactly right. I went and found a picture of you when you were bodybuilding and went and grabbed that. So anyway, so the premise of that story there is that there was a world annihilation period where a group of countries, and in this case it was China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and a bunch of terrorist groups had allied together and had a synchronized attack on the Western world. Yeah. And basically life and the technologies we know today was destroyed. I mean, with the nuclear bombs and the electromagnetic wave devices they used, that they all triggered at the same time on Easter Sunday, destroyed all the electronics. I mean, basically with the electronic waves, the microchips and everything in our electronics got destroyed. So there was no satellite, there is no phones, there's no TV, there's no nothing. And they also attacked the utilities in our country. So basically we went back to a primitive world, and my story is about life as it started in 2075. living in a primitive world and starting over, basically. And it's kind of crazy. You were asking where did I get my ideas?
What, MLA? You
This
don't think that
particular
looks like
book
me? Come on.
and the two that followed
Be
in
nice.
the trilogy, they were all based on dreams.
Yeah.
Dreams that I had regularly, and they were wild dreams. There were, in the trilogy itself, there's up to 35 unique creatures that were created by Zolak and his offspring. Zolak was a twisted scientist who created these monsters out of genetic mutations of plants, animals, and insects, and combining them together. So my dream created a lot of different monsters, and these monsters would lurk in the shadows and attack the people that were in this village that this particular scientist hated and was trying to get them killed.
Wow.
So the story it's basically still like that. I would wake up every morning, and I'd usually have 1 to 2, maybe more chapters of stuff floating around in my head at the time, and I'd get my, sit on a coffee pot, take care of Mother Nature's business, and then go sit down at the computer and start writing. And I might write, sometimes it might take me 2, 3, 4 hours to write what was floating in my head at the time I woke up with these dreams. And in the process of writing, more ideas would surface, and then I'd keep writing. I'd just keep
Does
writing
anyone else dream this vividly?
run out of
Do you guys
material
have dreams like this that you
being
could write
generated on the
stories from
spot
them?
or were generated in the dreams from the night before.
Yeah.
So that, I started that book in June of 2014, and then June of 2015, I published the book on Amazon. That was the first book I ever published. Now, if somebody would have asked me, or somebody would have told me, let's say 2 years before that I was going to write science fiction and publish a book, I would have told them they were a lunatic. There's no way I would do such a thing. But
so what did you do before writing, though? Like, why would you say that? Like, were you in a profession?
I graduated from Michigan State with an electrical engineering degree and worked for IBM for 30 years. So I was technology, logical thinker. I was not one of these creative thinkers creating new stories and stuff like that. Not something that I ever imagined myself doing. I retired after 30 years with IBM, and then that was in 2007.
Chat, do you guys dream
And
like
then
this?
in 2014,
Do you think you could write a book?
Books. I actually started writing a financial book to pass on my investment ideas that I had gathered over the years to my children. So I have 2 daughters, and I wrote 400 pages of that.
Holy!
My dreams started taking over. The creative stuff just started flooding my head, and I decided, well, if that's what my brain wants to create, then I guess I'm going to put it down on paper and start writing it.
That 400 pages of a financial book. I can't answer. I couldn't do a math quiz in high school, and you're going to write a 400 page.
Well, I had been investing from 1980 throughout. So I've been, investing for a long time.
Wow.
On the side, this wasn't a job or anything. It was just my part-time kind of thing I did for the time.
I think you and I got to talk because I have some things happening in my life in the near future here in the next year or so that are going to dramatically change my financial structure. That I need some good friendly expertise where there's no major compensation involved that may influence the conversation. So we get the idea that you get your book concepts from dreams. Is that still the case, or was that just how you started?
Well, that was the case for the first 2 books for sure, almost all the way through those 2 books.
Sure.
And halfway through the 3rd book, the final book of the trilogy. So let me just pop those 2 books up there so you can kind of see what they look like.
And while you're popping those up, did you always know it was going to be a trilogy?
No. In fact, after writing the first book, that was the writing part is the fun part. but the
Sure.
actual work to format it, to edit it, to structure it in the format that you need to publish it was a lot of work and work I don't enjoy. I mean, and that's probably that and marketing is about 2/3 of the effort. The
Yeah,
one third
I
is
get
putting
that.
the that's the fun part. Then you got to actually, get down and start, doing everything you need to publish it in a professional looking book. Okay.
You mean it has to look good and read well?
Yeah, yeah. You got to attract those people with the cover. And
Yeah.
so I went out and got a good professional artist doing the cover, and she did a great job on the covers and everything. So, I know it's the inside of the book that really matters, but that cover is the first thing that they're going to see. If they don't
Yeah.
like the cover, they're not even going to look on the inside. So,
Yeah, that makes complete sense.
here's
Sounds like dating.
this is the second book. It's called the New World Blue Moon Generation,
I love that cover.
and that story includes a story about the children of the heroes that were in the first book.
Gotcha.
So their offspring are the heroes in this second book.
Uh-huh.
And then the third book that I wrote, and that second book came out in 2016. So basically, I wrote that one and published it in about 10 months.
So Andy, that's a great question. Well, first I want to say my chat loves that cover as well. They thought that was a beautiful cover of that book. Ironically, the one with the picture of me on the cover, nobody said anything about it being a great cover. I just want to note that. But
they didn't want to compliment you.
But I guess out of that comes a different question. So you said it took 10 months to write this second book. How long did it take to write the first one? And is one of those times indicative of the normal?
The first book took exactly a year, from June 2014. I published it in June of 2015. Okay, is that indicative? Well, that just depends on the author, and that was my first book. So
yeah,
I think the thing that really set it up was that for every chapter in that book, I took it to writers groups that I joined.
I was going to ask you about this. Yeah,
and we would do reading critique sessions, and basically I was going to 3 writers groups. 2 of them were once a month, and the third one, which is the one that I went to the most, either was twice a month or 3 times a month, depending on whether there were 3 Wednesdays or whether there were 5 Wednesdays in a month. So that one, I had a lot of great authors, a couple that had published several books and were really experienced. Mm-hmm. And they were really critical and very good at telling me what I really needed to do to improve.
Now, was that hard to hear, criticism of, because this is your baby? This is like, it's like painting something and someone saying, "Oh, it doesn't look right because you didn't use this technique or you didn't do this thing, and your audience will love it more if you paint it this way."
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it really meant a lot having that help with those people. But yeah, it was hard to hear at first. You think you're the best writer in the world when you first write that first start of that manuscript. You look at that, you've rewritten it, and you're going, "Oh wow, this
Big
really
Pretty, thank you for the follow and welcome to the gym,
then
buddy."
you go into that first couple of meetings, and they reshape their head, And
don't forget Thursday's leg day, buddy. Yeah, I mean that's. I mean, I think
you got to have thick skin. I mean, if you really want to be a writer, you've got to have thick skin. When somebody tells you need to improve in certain areas, especially people who are experienced and know what they're talking about.
Yeah, exactly, and that's where one of my questions is around this. I want to ask you what advice you have for writers and budding writers and stuff like that. But I mean, you really have to be open to other writers' critique as well, because it's almost like a Michelin restaurant that has the food critic come in and sit down and they critique the food and the service and all that kind of stuff and the atmosphere, and you almost have to have that for a book too.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, advice to other writers who are getting started out is
Good morning or good afternoon,
go
Big Pretty.
find
Glad you're here, buddy. Hope
local
little
writers
Pretty's doing good
group
too.
that you can drive to at least once a month. If you can find one that's more than once a month, where they're actually doing reading critiques, where you read a chapter and they critique it on the spot. Um, it helps you. It helps you in many ways. One is it keeps you on a schedule where you want to create work and be ready for the next meeting so you can produce and read new material. So every month, I'm trying to get 2 or 3 chapters done because I'm in 3 different groups, and I want to get as much feedback as I can from all of these authors that are, listening to my story.
Yeah.
And, and then go home, think through all the notes that I wrote while they were telling me, what I was doing wrong and what I need to do, to improve it, and then work on that, and then, have that ready. Now, I rarely went back and reread what it is that I changed because at the time I was writing so much, I really needed to focus on each new chapter and get comments on every single new chapter. Because I valued it so much that I wanted to make sure that every single chapter went through a reading critique at least.
Now, are your books really emotional books? Do they take you on a bit of a roller coaster of excitement and drama and, the pain of loss and that sort of stuff? Do they make you cry?
Oh yeah. Absolutely. I mean, the trilogy is more of an adventure, and it's more of suspense and fear kind of stuff. But because you're always in a battle with these monsters all the time, fearing for your life. But it also deals with family values, and so it has a story of the families that are involved in this story, and it gets emotional when maybe somebody gets killed or injured, or in one case there where the older teacher of these kids, when they were starting out, starts getting dementia, and he starts losing his memories and stuff, and you start feeling sad, and then he passes away.
Yeah.
So and then later in the book, maybe if it's a true story, a real story, something that could happen, some of the good people die. And so, there's a lot of sadness when some of the characters you've fallen in love with, killed.
So that raises a different question then. And so, I mean, a lot of this is, for me, I would think would come from lived experience, the things that I've gone through in my life, whatever the case is. So does writing in this form or fashion with such depth of emotion, do you find that exhausting, or does it energize you? Does it go the other way?
It's not exhausting. My stories are exciting stories, so I never felt exhausted. I always was, willing and ready to write something new.
Yeah.
I was, and I think my dreams knew that that's what I wanted, and that's why they kept producing new stuff.
Yeah.
So I was always writing something, and there's very few slow times in these books. They're full of action, full of adventure, and then the pause and the break, I guess, to give readers a little break is, when it gets into the family stuff and some of those emotions.
Yeah.
So those books, the emotions in those books weren't the same as the emotion of writing the orphanage story, which was my story and experience of all the sad stuff about your childhood being interrupted and living in an orphanage, and what you face, during those periods of time, and the heartbreak, being dropped off at the orphanage, the heartbreak, and you got a visit from your mom, and at the end of that visit, she's telling you she's leaving when you thought she was there to rescue you. Those are emotions that are deep, and dark kind of emotions. And so the orphanage book has a lot of very deep emotions. But, You can't just have a book that's all dark and sadness, or you're not going to have a whole lot of readers. So,
So
they've included all of my shenanigans that I got in trouble with at the orphanage, and so the readers will have tears from
yeah,
the sadness, and they'll have tears from the laughter.
yeah.
They'll have people sitting next to them wondering, "What on earth are you reading?"
And Andy, I will admit, when I read the book, having lived a lot of not exact experiences, but the idea of being torn between parents, divorce, and poverty, all this kind of stuff. Having lived through that personally, it really evoked a lot of emotions in me. I'm not going to lie. It helped me to process some stuff in the sense that, because I know Andy personally now, and I know that Andy's a successful person and has done this thing and is now on this journey through retirement and in loving this next chapter of, well, literally next chapter of writing. It really helped me to understand and better tell my story about how I have overcome, about how I survived trauma and those sorts of things in my life. So I think that's one of the beautiful things about those sort of stories when we share is it helps to bring others along.
Yes, and that's part of the feedback I got from the readers that they're really tied into the story, and so much so that even after publishing the story, they wanted me to continue writing, even though I wasn't planning on writing anymore. So my followers have me writing new stuff every 2 to 3 days. I'm putting out short stories of my life after the orphanage.
Yeah. So they can find that on your Facebook page?
On my author page.
On your author page,
Andy,
okay.
Andy Skrzynski's author page on Facebook.
Okay. So if anyone in my chat wants to follow up with that, so Andy Skrzynski, his name's on the screen, so if you want to check him out there, but he has a Facebook author page you can follow up, and Andy adds to those stories regularly. So if you're interested in learning more about Andy and in the story that we're talking about, we're not going into great detail because we want you to read the book, but at the same time, if you do want little extra snippets, Andy does add little.
And I don't worry about people reading these stories or reading part of the stories that I shared about the book, because once people get into the stories, they're going to want to read the whole book anyway. I mean, I shared every chapter of my first book, or that last book on the orphanage book, as I was reading with all these people on Facebook, and they all went and bought my book. They didn't.
They didn't hesitate.
They didn't hesitate.
Yeah, good. The first book that you wrote, did you find that book 2 came out of your desire to write more, or your audience's desire that you write more?
No, the first book just came out of the fact that my head was flooded with these dreams every morning. They were exciting, and I thought, why waste them? I'm going to start writing them.
And so did the second book come out of that then, or one of those two?
The second book came out of, I think I shared that story last time, but at my first book signing locally here in Mineola, Texas, during the book signing, a lady, she was an elderly lady, and I guess she had read that first book, and when she came up to me, she grabbed me by the shoulders and shook me and said, "When are you going to write the second book?" I looked at Bonnie, and she looked at me, and I had not planned to write another book, but we kind of, we connected and said, I guess I'm writing another book. So that's how
awesome.
that came out. and then once I started writing that second book, during the process of that second book being written, our first grandchild was born. And I had a nickname for her. And so I actually made one of the characters in the book. I named the same nickname in that second book. And then she had an important role in that second book, but she became the real hero in the third book, the last book.
I love it. I love that, because there's a story to that now. This young lady is going to grow up knowing that she's in this book and that she's a superhero.
Yeah, she's going to read this story about herself.
Yes, that's so cool, and that's
I hope when she's old enough, I mean, you know, she really can't read these books until she's in her teenage years because there's just too much
But how
monster
awesome would it be,
nightmares
Andy?
stuff.
Think about that, Andy. You get your little granddaughter when she's 5, 6 years old. Have her sit on your lap, and you start telling her these stories in her name of this adventurer and this hero in your books. And then one day she can then read those stories for herself. What an amazing blessing for her.
I'm going to start out reading my
Hey, Batman, what's up, buddy?
childhood story of the orphanage so that she knows what her grandpa, what his life was like. So, you know, I can read that to her while she's still pretty young.
Yeah.
I've got family members and others that are reading this story to their children already. In fact, I get together right now once a week to read the story to my wife's twin sister's grandchildren. They're into the story, and she was reading to her. So I started reading some of the chapters to them. So remotely, because they're in Michigan and I'm in Texas. But it's a unique type of thing. But you know, I had that idea. Well, I want to make sure that she kind of feels part of this future story, and that, you know, she has this role where she's actually helping the people that are struggling. So I didn't show you the picture of the third book. Now,
let's see the third book. And while you're bringing that up, I'll ask a follow-up question, because you bringing your granddaughter up brings another question up. So do you regularly put people that you know or characters of people that you know or things of that nature in your books, or is that something you did uniquely in that instance?
No. I have others in the book. I actually have a story about myself in the first book.
Oh, yeah?
This third book is the...
Scroll up a little bit. We can't see the top of the book. Let's see the top of the book a little bit.
Oh, the top of the book? Hang on.
Yeah, I just want to see the whole picture so that we recognize it when we go to the bookstore on Amazon.
Yeah. So this has got blood dripping from the top. That's my granddaughter.
That's awesome. As a grown-up there,
know,
yeah?
Doing
good, Batman. Thanks, buddy. How are you?
Eyes in them. They're the eyes of mu clones. Mu clones are the cloned mutant beasts that this guy keeps creating from insects and plants and animals.
Yeah.
And unleashing them on everybody. So this name of this one was The New World Crimson Winter.
That's really good. So do you know the artist personally who makes these things, or you just somebody you hire that kind of puts this stuff together for you?
I found on the internet that I saw her, some of the books that she had done, and I really liked them, so I started using her. And she did such a good job on that first one that I continue to use her for all of the books.
Yeah. So
not cheap, but you know, if you want to, what you'll discover is that you need to market books, and there's certain marketing websites out there that'll help you market, especially electronic books, the KDP Kindle versions, or some other electronic versions of the book. And to do that, the good ones won't even accept the book unless they have a professional-looking cover. So that's why I say that cover does mean a lot. You better have a good-looking, eye-catching cover, or they're not going to waste time putting it in their list.
Yeah. So what's the process then for doing that? Does the artist go and read the book, or do you just give them the premise, like the Cole's Notes version, and say this is what we're talking about, or do you come in with an idea?
I told her what I wanted to see on the cover. So, you know, I went basically for her. You pick out pictures that you can find on these sites that provide pictures. Sometimes if you pay a monthly fee, in her case, she has a subscription to a couple of different sites. iStock is one.
Yep, I'm familiar.
Another one. Well, you go through all the lists of pictures and try to find a picture of each of the people that you want on this story. And so, you know, it's not easy trying to find the pictures that you envision in your head that matches the pictures that you put in the thing where you say, I want a man warrior looking kind of guy.
Yeah.
I mean, I went through hundreds of pictures just trying to find the three people on the front cover of the first book. They're all from separate pictures, and she puts them together, and then she puts the environment around them to match what I was trying to portray in the book. And I told her what the title of the book was and everything. And now we went through a big thing. She didn't want to put those scary eyes in the cover. I mean, she has a certain thing to her that, in her mind is what an attractive cover looks like. And she just didn't want those eyes on that cover. And I said, the eyes go on the cover. I don't care. I know you don't like it, but I like them, and they're going to go on the cover. And they're going to go on all, Then I told her to put them on the other covers when I came up with those books too. So she gave in, and I'm glad I did. I mean, people look at that cover the first time and go, "Oh, look at those eyes."
Yeah, that's cool. I do admit it does catch you a little bit. So ask you a question, because your books are pretty in depth. Is it a spiritual? Are there any spiritual elements? Do you contained in the books, or do you yourself see it as a spiritual experience, or do you have a spiritual experience at any time when you're writing books? Or because I'm a believer. I'm a Christian. I believe certain things, and certain things invoke certain spiritual responses from me. I'm just curious.
Yeah. In the trilogy, they're always the basic village that's described in this new world is a Christian village. Okay, so you'll hear or you'll read some of these characters saying prayers during the tough times and so forth, in their mind or out loud.
Yeah.
And certainly the story of the St. Joseph's Home for Boys, there's a lot of spiritual stuff in that book as well, throughout the book. And I knew God wanted me doing this. I couldn't understand why God had me doing the monsters and all these crazy things in my dreams. It wasn't until my first book signing that I realized why I was going through all this. And at that first book signing, I had family members and classmates and teachers show up I hadn't seen in over 50 years, some over 40 years. So then I realized, this is what all this is about. And for each of the books, I always met new people and connected with people that I hadn't seen in a long time. And now, with the orphanage book, it's even a whole new level of spiritual stuff. The fact that I'm getting so many comments from people that are thanking me for writing the story and them reading it and finding the benefit of reading the messages in the story and the positive thinking in the story to help them through this COVID stuff and through like the house burned down and stuff like that. It makes you feel good, and you realize this is what a lot of this is all about. You're trying to help other people. I mean, I always believe that I don't want to leave this world not having helped other people in some way, and I'm finding that by writing the stories and sharing the stories, I'm helping a lot of people ways I never imagined. So
I love that.
I'm thankful that that's the case, and I'm happy to follow that path. And I always have been. I'm one that believes that God had a path for me, and I'm going to follow it. Yeah. And that's why I started writing those stories.
So did this process?
They were there, but they were there, and if God wants to create these in my head, then I'm going to write them down.
Yeah. So did this process make you think different about fiction writing? In the role that could play that it does. I mean, you don't have to tell an Andy story, right? In the sense of an orphanage, but I mean, you can.
Yeah, I enjoyed reading fiction or watching a fiction movie, but I never imagined writing because I never imagined myself being creative. But I guess I wouldn't have been creative if it wasn't for the dreams. The dreams were the creation.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine why all these creative things are coming out of my head, but that was the creation. I did discover halfway through the third book of the trilogy, uh, had a family health problem, and so there was a 9 month interruption where I couldn't write for 9 months. And when I returned to writing, I didn't have the dreams anymore. I still don't have the dreams. So half of that third book was tough. I mean, you want to talk about those those times as an author when things get really rough, and you might have writer's block, and I've had writer's block before. Uh, in this case, the writer's block was because I wasn't getting dreams.
Yeah.
I
So
now
writer's block is a real
come up
thing.
in daytime thinking about creative stuff that I hadn't really had to spend a whole lot of time doing.
Doing before, yeah.
It took a little while for me to do that.
Yeah.
And then finally it kicked in, and I was thrilled with the result of coming up with some new ideas for that
Chad,
third book.
if any of you guys have questions for Andy, feel free to ask me, and I'll ask
it turned out really
for
great.
you.
And then I learned, hey, I can do this. I can create my own stuff without having the dream.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was good. And to be honest, I think God had me doing this trilogy and getting through all of those books and the experiences of writing, the experiences of editing, the experiences of publishing, so that I could do a better job in the orphanage book, because that by far is the most meaningful in my life and it's the best book I've ever written. And it couldn't have been done in that fashion if I had already experienced, 3-4 years of writing those first 3 books.
Yeah. Yeah. And that kind of leads into my a follow-up question to some of the other stuff we've talked about. Has there been any one scene or chapter or story that you've had to tell that was the hardest to tell?
Well, yes, in the orphanage book, the hardest one was the day I was returning from kindergarten, and it was the day when I went to the door and opened the door. My mom had suitcases ready to leave, and she told us we were leaving home, and she was getting divorced. That was a very traumatic scene. It wasn't so hard to write. I don't know why it didn't seem so hard to write, and I rewrote it and edited it and rewrote it, edited it and reread it and read it out loud a couple of times. Then I went to the reading critique, and then in the middle of the reading critique, when I got to that scene, I actually broke down. And I'd never had that emotion, but all of a sudden, boom!
Yeah,
it hit me, and I couldn't read any further. I mean, it just I broke down, and I was shocked.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was probably the toughest thing I had to write. Because I knew my childhood was interrupted. Now, I didn't know how bad it was going to get interrupted. At that point, I didn't know I was going to, a few months later, when mom found out she couldn't take care of us and was going to return custody to our dad, that we were going to be put in the orphanage. Now, that was a huge, that was another big emotional thing.
Yeah.
Finding out you'd be dropped off at the orphanage, and you have no idea if anybody's going to return and get you. You're hoping they're going to come and get you.
Yeah.
But that was emotional too.
So I'll ask this in 2 parts. Does your family support your writing career? In the second half of that, particularly in light of the fact that you're writing about your childhood, not fictionally, but as an autobiography.
Yeah. I kept with my siblings who were in the book.
Yeah.
And, you asked if I had written about other people. I did write about my cousin, Sandy, who played a big role in overcoming some of the dreams. She was a babysitter. She was babysitting us during the summers just before the orphanage experience. And we
I
were real
remember
close
reading
to her.
that.
She's probably the friendliest person other than my mom. And so I, definitely wrote about her. And then I also wrote about my Aunt Frances. There's only 2 living siblings left from my father's side out of 10. So I wrote a chapter about my Aunt Frances. And of course, talked to both of them, and they said they had no problem. I mean, kind of hard to have problems when you're writing great things about them.
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Hmm.
so yeah, definitely wrote about them. And one of the characters, the mentor of the kids in the first trilogy book, was a guy that was the only one in that story that lived through the period that we're living through now, before that annihilation period. And so I had him going. He graduated from an electrical engineering degree from Michigan State, which is exactly what I did.
Yeah.
So he had some of my history in there too.
So so along the family lines, well, not necessarily, but when you write in your trilogy,
Uh-huh.
are there any secrets in there? Are there any like hidden little like not messages, but like things that only maybe somebody who is intimately acquainted would recognize? So when your granddaughter, when she gets older, is there part of her story in the book that she's going to go, oh, I remember that happened, and that's my story, or where
No,
the average
no,
reader can collect
yeah.
these thoughts and suddenly they arrive at this eureka. Oh, that's awesome! What a great little thing he's put in the book, type of thing.
No, it's nothing like that in the trilogy. Um, what she'll get out of it is,
Thank you, Morg.
she is this person that's trying to help her village and in the end, trying to help the world.
Yeah.
So, that's what she'll get out of it. There's nothing, she was so young, there wasn't a whole lot of things I could, really call upon to, uh, put into the book because she was younger than just this person in the book started out with, right? So.
That's cool. I know that. I mean, I used to read a lot of choose your own adventure books and that kind of stuff growing up, and and some of the books that I read that were choose your own adventure, you had to really pay attention in each chapter because it would give you little hints as you went along about kind of the next step and in the decisions you'd make and stuff. And I'm always looking for little Easter eggs, they're called, as you go.
But in the orphanage book, one of the things that I did do is at the front end of every chapter, I had a quote by me, and it was, it's a quote about things to look for in life. How should you, look at life and so forth. So little messages like that would start every chapter of the orphanage book. And people really, people commented that they really appreciated those too.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, that's for me. That I would love that stuff. I'd love when. Yeah, I love little nuggets like that. When you were writing the book, or the books, you talked about the editing process, and it being not only lengthy and difficult, and not the part that you didn't enjoy the most. Was there anything that you edited out, or wish that you had been able to include after the fact, whether during the editing process or maybe a year later, you're like, oh crap, I wish I would have put in blah, 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 or I missed this, or I see how this story could have went this way if I just said da, 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 whatever the case is.
It's more of the former. Right? There's lots of things I edited out. I mean, you go and you write and you write and you write, and as you're reading, as you're trying to finalize the final things, you want it to flow well, read well. You don't want to, you don't want anything that raises any questions in the reader's mind about, what did he mean by this, or you want it to go smoothly. You don't want them to, hesitate, and then you realize I didn't really need this part of it, so there may be parts, that I just kind of deleted altogether. I do remember one time I was writing in my office, and in our area, the power goes down every once in a while, and most of the time it recovers and saves it. But in this particular case, I lost more than a chapter. And I had spent, hours writing that chapter. I was really not happy because I could never really write that chapter exactly the way I wrote it the first time. And I don't know why, but I never felt like I ended up with what I had that first time I wrote that
Yeah.
chapter. It was good, but it just wasn't as good as that first time. And
Yeah.
I kind of frustrated that I could never get back to that.
Yeah.
You know, I probably the frustration helps keep you from, getting to that level where you had the same thing before. But that kind of stuff, and everything. What I do with editors is I don't have a lot of money, so I ask for volunteers, beta reader volunteers, and fortunately for all books, I got plenty of beta readers. In fact, in the last book, I got over 100 people asking. I had to cut it off at 100 because it's just too much input. And I had a for 10 in that first or that last book, the orphanage book, where they were really excellent editors. I mean, I got lots of great feedback from them. Now there were things that they wanted me to change, like my style of writing. This story, The Orphanage, was from a 5-year-old. My eyes as a 5-year-old.
Yeah.
And so in dialogue and thought, I wanted to be exactly as I thought back in those days, including when my English was not that great, because of my mom's background and everything. My English was not proper English, and so I wanted to say it exactly as I did back in those days. Mm-hmm. And
yeah, you wanted to be true.
Some of these editors a problem, and they didn't think I could write it quite like that. And I thought about it real hard, and I thought about rewriting it a little bit, but then I said no. And the honest truth is, I think that is one of the things that the readers really appreciate, is that it's exactly the way I was back in those days.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I mean, you talk about perspective a little bit in that conversation, in answering that question. And I'm curious, as you write, whether it's the autobiography, and I guess you're writing your perspective in the autobiography for the most part. I don't know that maybe that's a follow-up question to that, is did you interview any family members to get their perspective when you were writing that book? But my first question is about writing from the opposite sex standpoint. So when you have a female character, do you find it challenging to write from a female perspective or anything like that?
For the most part, no. And it's probably because, I started writing in such a later part of my life where I've seen and witnessed, lots of reactions and emotions and stuff like that from both sexes. And I'm a listener kind of person. So, when people have problems, they feel comfortable talking to me about the problems, and I'll, talk through, maybe look at things from a different perspective or something. So I didn't have any problems for the most part. Now, I don't have anything deeply sexual or anything in my trilogies or any of my books. They're books that can be read by children. Okay?
So they're PG or rated?
So there's
G?
romance in that, and there's some kissing in that, but it doesn't get real romantic. I mean, there was one scene in the first book where there's a little bit more going on, and
a little more heavy petting.
When I finished that book, I did ask a couple of my women authors and my wife to kind of look at it and see if maybe they would, have different kinds of perspectives on that. Yeah. And so, in that one case, I did ask for some help there, and they had some good ideas to,
Because I know my wife for sure would be all over it, saying, "Nope, that's not how it's happening. This is you got to no way I feel like that. You got."
Right. Well, my wife helped with that kind of along the way anyway.
Yeah.
Because she read every one of my chapters several times. She was my first editor to begin with before I sent it to anybody. So,
did you find that easy, Andy? Her being that involved in Because I mean, I work with my wife every day, and
Yeah.
sometimes that's good, and sometimes that's a struggle for both of us. Because I know that sometimes I say and do things that just don't jive.
For the
And
most part, it wasn't a problem. For the most part,
nice.
uh, of course, because I'm writing so many books so fast, I'm producing chapters all the time. So she's very busy. She's reading and rereading, and she's probably busier than she had hoped to be at that point in her life. But she also had a job that was she had one of these jobs where there was a lot of downtime, where there's just nobody around, there wasn't anything to do,
Yeah.
and so it was easy for her to pick up and read some of these things and edit it during those downtimes, and it helped her pass the time because otherwise she would have been bored to death with what she had in her plate there at work. So, but she, there's a lot of editing that she did right here in our living room, and yeah, probably more. She probably did more of that than she ever wanted to, but she was very good about it. I'm very fortunate that I've had her support.
Good.
Uh,
Yeah.
to
Because
this thing. So
that's everything when it comes to this kind of stuff. Because it is life consuming at times, and if you don't have that level of support, the fact that you've got to cloister yourself during the writing process, the creative process, very often it's having somebody that's willing to step back and allow you just to be that person for a moment is huge. And I'm thankful my wife indulges my passions every now and then as well, and allows it
yeah,
to.
there's times when it's hard because I really dived into this stuff, and I'm so devoted to when I got a project and I got a goal line to get to. I'm heads down, and I am focused on getting it done, and so I spend a lot of hours on this stuff, and we're now both retired, but and she was working part time there for a while for much of this time. There, if we would have had our way in terms of just doing whatever we wanted to do, we probably would have spent more time together. But writing the book didn't allow us to spend as much time as we probably would have preferred.
Yeah.
Both.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, you talk about the time and how once you get focused, you sit down and you get to work. Did you find yourself doing a lot of research preparing for these books? I mean, the autobiography, I guess you got to do a bit of research, talking to family members and stuff, but even your
Yeah,
other.
because it was, I mean, more than 90% of the content in the orphanage book is my experiences from my memory, from my eyes and everything. So there wasn't a lot. There was a little bit, but not a lot. And there wasn't a whole lot either with the trilogy because it's made up night. My dreams and stuff are making this stuff up. It's not like none of these creatures have ever existed. I might have read a little bit about gene splicing and stuff like that a little bit because I wanted to explain a little bit about that, but I didn't get too deep in that. I didn't want to get too heavy into that. This is just excitement, adventure about escaping and fighting these monsters all the time, and other challenges that you have living a primitive life.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Hmm.
So yeah, not a whole lot of. Fortunately, not a whole lot that I had to actually go on and investigate and research on.
That's good. That's good. Now, in your books, so you've written how many books now? Four? Of the 4 books, do you have a favorite that you're like, oh, I just love this one. I love how this one is worded. I love the characters, blah, blah, blah. Is there one that you pick out as you're like, yeah, that's my favorite?
Well, I love all 3 of the books on this trilogy. I just, because I developed these characters. When you really start writing something like this, you're developing a new world, and everything is different than what you're used to in this world. I mean, you got to put yourself in that world. So I lived that world. These people were my friends. I mean, I'm in it. So I love the characters and the story. But given all that, it's still not the same as laying your heart out in the orphanage book.
Yeah.
So the orphanage book is the one that I consider my highlight of my writing. And um, since it was my fourth book writing and all the experience behind it, it is my best writing and I'm most proud of. And the fact that it's helping so many people makes it even more important to me.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's the orphanage book is a big deal, but, you know, I would never part with any of my trilogy books either. I love them.
Yeah. So are you surprised then when people come to you and either like a particular story or a chapter out of your book or a specific book as a whole, and you're like, really, you like that part? Is like are you ever surprised about what people absolutely love about your books or elements of your books?
Yeah, sometimes I am. I mean, the people, everybody looks at things from a different perspective, and a lot
Yeah.
of it has to do with their own experiences. So they may be reading a part of a book that triggers something in their life. Like one lady said, "Wow, this really helped me understand what my mom was going through."
Mm.
You know, when I mean, even in this case, I think it was she was in the orphanage, not an orphanage, but in a nursing home. But lots of people have related to stories that they were hearing from either grandparents or uncles and aunts, or even parents that were in an orphanage. And so they may have tuned in to certain things while they were reading that they commented about, and I thought, oh, I hadn't even thought how that might affect people thinking about something. So,
Mm.
so yeah, usually positively surprised that someone got something beneficial out of a part that I didn't think maybe was all that important, but you know, it meant more to other people.
Yeah, because that's the one thing that always catches me. Like you talked about the interview and losing that chapter that one time. That's the hardest thing for me. I'm a one take guy. If I'm doing a
Yeah,
scripted interview or I have to do a commercial to some degree, which we've done several commercials and videos for Rise Above, um, if I don't get it on the first take, forget it. I gotta come back next week because the more I try to rewrite it in my mind and re-say it, the worse it's gonna get. I'm just gonna break it, and I'm gonna get frustrated. And it's not. I overthink it. Essentially, is what happens.
okay.
So when you started telling that story about you never got that chapter the second time, I'm like, yep, that's I have a similar experience with scripted interviews or interviews where I have to kind of repeat a narrative, a certain specific phrase, or something.
Right, right.
Yeah, I really struggle with that whole mindset, and I'm always surprised when people come in to Rise Above and you've been in this building, and
Yep.
into know the different facets and different elements of who we are and what we are and what makes up Rise Above. And it's interesting to me how some people key in on, the building or, oh, I really love your teacher, or everyone focuses on a different element that they just love. And it always surprises me. And I love getting people's perspective on what they love about the ministry in the work that we do.
Yeah, and everybody has a different experience
Yeah.
when it comes to creating new stuff. I mean, some things are easier for some people and more difficult for others.
Mm. With the writing process itself, pardon me, did you find that after you wrote the first book that your process changed in some way, that you learned something in a way that it allowed you to, oh, I didn't know I could do that, or hey, after writing this first book and seeing people's responses, I was able to come back and make this adjustment in some way?
Yeah, I think you're doing that throughout your learning experience as learning new things. Particularly since I'm going to these reading critiques, particularly the one that had the more critical authors in there. They always had, as I matured in my writing, then they added more things, things that they didn't bring up before because they probably figured it would be over my head, right? So as I matured, their critique matured as well. But also, as you're learning and um, the writing becomes easier. I mean, it used to be that, like, let's take something simple. Sometimes I'd write a chapter and I go through there and I might get hooked on a certain word and use that word way too many times in
Yeah.
that chapter. We call those echo words, right?
Yeah. We do it all the
Well,
time in our
that
natural
happens a
speech.
lot, and I think that happens a lot with new writers. That there's a certain way that they think, and there's certain words that they like, and so their library of words that they can choose from is rather limited, and you learn to go start looking up synonyms and antonyms for words so
Those are
that you
great.
don't keep repeating the same words
Those
over
are
and over
great
again.
dictionaries to have.
Yes. And my wife and I, we play Upwards, which is, a word game
Yeah.
all the time. I mean, every day during meals, we're playing this word game all the time so that you just exercises your mind
Yep.
for creating new words and stuff. So that's just one little example, but this is happening on a much broader scale as you're learning to write. It becomes easier and easier, and getting to the point where in the last book, even though I had 100 beta readers, I didn't need 100 beta readers. Um, I didn't need as much editing as I needed in the first two books. The first two books, I needed a lot of editing, a lot of help.
Yeah.
But getting to the fourth book, now I don't need as much interaction with the writers groups as I used to. The only thing I was doing, in the last year is I'm helping because now I'm an experienced writer. I'm giving back to those that are the newer writers who don't have experience and helping them learn to
That's
write
awesome.
more than anybody's helping me in those meetings these days.
It's funny, Andy, that you say that because that's our prayer and hope for our students. That they, as they're in here learning the process of how to overcome the challenges that they face in life, that one day they too will become the mentor to somebody. Yeah, that's awesome. That's an awesome kind of frame for everyone's life that we should all strive for. So, do you find that process of start to finish has helped you define what, pardon the expression, that literary success looks like? Has that changed over time? On your first book, did your definition of success, hey, I wrote a book, I'm successful, has that developed since from first to last?
Oh yeah, that's a maturing process too. Because I mean, when you're first starting out, you have these dreams that, of course, you're going to be the greatest writer ever, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
your book is going to take off, and all this other stuff, and then reality sets in, and you realize, you're just a no name, and nobody knows you. And you got to establish, a presence and so forth over time. It's not something that happens overnight.
Yeah.
So your whole thought process about success changes. But probably the biggest change for me is my interactions with the followers of the orphanage book and the fact that they want me to continue writing because what they're getting out of it is the messages that I'm passing along through my
Yeah.
writing.
Yeah.
And they like my writing style. I write from the heart, and I write a little bit differently than a lot of authors. It's my writing style.
Yeah.
They really appreciate.
So what?
I think they feel that I'm more of a like just talking to a friendly neighbor, chatting, and so they feel more comfortable. I think with my writing style.
Yeah.
So that in combination with the messages, I continue to always. I mean, I've always, even in my trilogy, I mean, science fiction, adventure, I always had things in there I was trying to leave as little messages for younger people to think about as they're, growing up and maturing. So there's messages hidden throughout my stories, but the orphanage book has a lot
Yeah, yeah,
of
yeah.
stuff in my future writing of these short stories with my life after the orphanage is the same way.
Hmm. So have you found that your the literary success it definitely changed over time then for you?
Yes, 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 yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
So you touched on
My perspective of what is considered success has changed, and the actual success in sales has changed too, because I think my writing is better than it was earlier. Right?
yeah.
So the word of mouth, people passing along, the good words. I mean, I don't know that I mentioned it, but there's already 76 rating reviews on Amazon, and all
Wow.
but three are 5 stars. So it's very highly rated by everybody that's reading this thing.
Good.
So, uh, and that's part of that is because of the success that I have in having more experience writing and, telling a story that has a lot of messages that people want to read about. And I think the thing that a lot of people like is having faced those challenges that I continue to have a positive take and outlook to try to continue to do better. And I think that
Chat, you
helps
guys
people get
awake?
through hard times of their own
Spam some emotes for me. Let me know you're there.
because they recall some of the things that I might have gone through and how I perceived those things and how I looked at those things and still wanted to strive to get better.
Thanks, Batman. Yeah, I mean, and so you touched on something else there, and that even in that conversation about the success thing, you talked about marketing. How do you spread the word? Like, I write a book, then what? Like, you're not exactly taking out commercials on NBC, you know? So
Well,
is it?
there's a lot of things I learned. Okay, and this is for people who might think of self-publishing.
Yeah,
Okay, in my first book, I released at the same time paperback and the Kindle version, the electronic version.
yeah,
Now, here's the good and the bad of today's environment. For readers, they've got a great deal because there's a whole bunch of websites out there where they can hook into, and those websites will provide them with emails or or tweets that tell them what books are available for free at this point in time.
yeah,
And there's a lot, the way that people try to spread the word about the book and get recognition for their title and the name is they go and give these books for free.
yeah.
Okay, well, that has trained all of these readers that they really prefer books for free. So it's hard to make money,
So
especially in a world where where Amazon offers Prime users the opportunity to read electronic book for free.
yeah,
They pay the monthly fee. Amazon only pays you pennies
yeah,
for those books that they read for free.
yeah.
And so as an author, you're not making much money on those electronic books that are these Prime readers out there. And
Ha,
there's a lot of them.
have you
And
ever?
that's what they've learned. They learned, hey, I think I like this Prime thing. If I'm an avid reader, I just grab these books for free, or I'll just get on these websites and go look at what's for free and go get them right away. And I'll never have to pay a penny
Yeah,
to read the book. And so for readers, it's wonderful. For authors,
can be a
it's,
challenge.
it's tough. So, I had plans this way, but since I had the book signing this summer, I didn't have much choice other than to focus on releasing the paperback book.
Yeah,
Okay. Because I needed that for my book signing to sign, right? Physically. Well, it turns out that was the biggest blessing in the world. If I had probably released the Kindle version at the same time I did the paperback version, at least a third of my sales probably would have been free Kindle books,
yeah,
and I'd be getting nothing for them. Well, I haven't released the Kindle version. I released, just the paperback. I'm doing the audiobook because there's people who are legally blind that can't read those books.
Yep.
So I'm going to be doing the audiobook. You're not going to make a lot of money on the audiobook either, because they've got similar kind of deals for the audiobook where if they pay a monthly fee, they can go get these audiobooks.
Yeah.
So um, I have learned, I think, that I'd rather just release the paperback and go ahead and get people so charged up about reading that they want to read the book, and they'll buy the paperback. Now, the biggest revelation in all of this was sharing the chapters of my book, and I didn't share every chapter, full chapters. I would share maybe a half of it or 2/3 of it as it went along. Um, so for every chapter, I shared some of it on Facebook, and my Facebook membership for people following this kept growing and growing as people read the stories. They liked it. They invite their friends, and it grew fast. I mean, from December 16th when I opened it up this time last year, December 16th when I opened up this time last year, there was 740 by the time I got to the book signing.
Wow.
And again, there were people concerned that I was giving these away and no one's going to buy it. Nah, I didn't see that at all.
Yeah.
It just generated a lot of excitement about the story and got a lot of people spreading it word of mouth. And that continues today as I spread these short stories. I'm sharing these short stories that I'm writing about my life afterwards. That is growing a whole new group of memberships
Andy, do you think that if at some point, I'm not saying today or tomorrow or anything like that, but at some point, since you have a trilogy, do you think that releasing the first book for free might spark interest in the other two, where you kind of like, you lose one, but you gain two others type of things where, because
a little bit, but not enough.
Yeah, I figured.
Because I would do that. I would offer in fact, I reduced the price on the first book on the paperback, but it just doesn't generate enough. And nothing's generated enough interest to be what I've been doing with the orphanage book, which is sharing this stuff on Facebook and growing the membership and the interest that way.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
That was just a stroke of luck that I started doing that. And then that the interest grew so fast, I thought, wow, they really like this. I mean, this is generating a lot of interest.
So when you write, so talk about interest. A lot of people love having the hero or the mascot. You talked about your granddaughter in the one book. Is that a theme normally that you have some form of a hero or something that the book is completely based off, or are you just talking or telling a big story?
Well, the first book had three buddies. The three people on the front of that cover.
Yeah, like
they
Batman.
They were the heroes of the book. Farouk was the leader,
the
middle, the guy that I got a picture of you of for that cover. He was the leader of the village, and so he was the main guy. But his buddies were with him all the time. I mean, and they were saving each other's lives sometimes. So, they were the heroes. In the second book, the Blue Moon Generation, it was the children of those three that were the heroes that were always doing something, and the parents were still involved in the book very much, and so forth. And then it became who was kind of the main hero, but there's lots of heroes in these stories. I mean, it's a close knit village that was fighting for survival against all these monsters, and this group, this clan of people that were their enemies that were always creating these monsters and so forth. So there was something there, and of course with the orphanage book, the hero is in people's eyes is Andy Jr.
Yeah,
and so that's what everybody talks about is Andy Jr. And I almost talk about Andy Jr. as if it's somebody else, but
yeah.
it's because that's what everybody wants to hear about. Andy Jr.
Do you ever fancy yourself a full-time writer?
Uh, Not anymore. Like I said, I think this is the book that I can't be, and I'm not sure I want to attempt to try to be it because I can't imagine. I'm writing good stories right now about my life after the orphanage. But let's face it, your childhood is the one that has these huge emotional ups and downs sometimes,
Yeah.
and the adventure during your childhood is so much greater than your adventure after you grow up and you actually have to start working,
Pay taxes
nine to
and
five, and that's not so exciting. You're working
yeah,
for a
yeah.
company, and yeah, there's some exciting things in it, but it's not like your everyday actions and excitement that's going
Yeah.
on as a kid.
Well, maybe you were destined to be a Calvin and Hobbes-esque short story writer.
Yeah, well, yeah, who knows where this will end up? I don't foresee it being a book because, and I should never say never, because by the time I write all of these short stories, I will have enough for a
Oh,
book,
I'm sure you will.
uh, and I'm close to that already. But I just uh, like I said, the writing part is easy and the fun part. There's still that 2/3 part of it that's not as much fun and so forth. But over time, I mean, the marketing part is like what I'm doing right now. I mean, I enjoy this. This is exciting talking
Yeah.
about the story, talking about writing. That maybe somebody out there in the audience that is out there listening to me right now, and maybe listening to the video later, may learn from and gain something, and maybe they'll be great writers sometime in the future.
Yeah.
Uh, you don't know how you're influencing people. That's why you always want to. That's always why you want to put on a good face and talk about how things can help people because people are listening to you more than you might think
You
sometimes.
never know who's listening. Always, I say that all the time. You just never know who is sitting in the corner just quietly paying attention.
No, and some of these people that are listening that you don't realize are really young people.
Yeah. I work with
And
them every day.
yes, you do. Yes,
Yeah.
you do. You
Hey,
got one of those jobs where you can really influence people in a big way.
yeah. We got to keep that in the back of our minds constantly. A couple more questions, and we'll get you going. I don't want to take up too much of your day. Get your life back to normal without me bugging you with a million questions. Um,
None of this has bothered me at all. So you can do whatever, however long you want.
yeah, this is always it's been a joy. I'm glad we got a chance to come back around to this. But um,
I
do you do you ever read your own reviews? Do you ever Google yourself? A couple different questions there, but do you go on to
I read the reviews of the book
yeah.
definitely because I'm always wanting to see what people are saying, and when I recognize, sometimes I can recognize maybe who might have written it. Because
That's
I
my
got so many
sister.
followers, if they got a name that's similar to what's this on Facebook, I go back and thank them. A lot of times they use different names. You have no idea who's
Yeah,
writing these things.
yeah,
But you're trying to just gauge. You're just going positively, and yeah, I don't have any problem at all with the orphanage book. It just you know exceeded my expectations by a lot. So I'm
yeah.
glad
Have
things are
people
going the direction it is for that.
have people by and
Writing
large.
about myself, I did Google myself one time, my name, and I was shocked at how many pages came up of my book. I mean,
Yeah,
because I'm out there a lot and
yeah,
been marketing this stuff, and my name is not that common. It's
yeah,
not Andy Smith.
yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
Skrzynski. You type in Andy Skrzynski, and you're going to get a lot of my stuff on, 3, 4 Google pages on a desktop. So a lot
Are,
of stuff out there because a lot of it's stuff that I've generated over the years.
are people pretty gracious?
Oh, very great. I couldn't ask for better followers. Oh, these people are wonderful, and I every time I get new members, and I do a thank you and welcome to the new members. I mean, these people are very welcoming to these people, and they're always saying, "Hey, you're going to love this story. You're going to love this book. You're going to love this author page. You're going to enjoy it and have a lot of fun." And I stress, I ask people, invite your friendly people. I'm not looking for people that want to, grind an axe, and I
Yeah.
don't accept political stuff on my thing either. I want good stories. I want, you know, people talk about how this can positively influence their life and stuff like that. So, every once in a while, I, when I was on a different group, when I first started out on the Jackson group page, before I had my own author group, I could tell there was one boy who must have had some really bad experience. And every time I posted something, he'd get on there and he would just be saying these really bad things about the nuns and all that kind of stuff. That isn't something that isn't what I was ever trying to get. And I know that some people may have had a bad experience, but it's not something that I didn't have that experience. All I had was good things, and I was so thankful and so grateful. Not and some, I get on sometimes the children of the 60s and 70s and 80s. So many people have heard so much about these negative things about priests and nuns over the years. Well, they think that every orphanage is that way or every church is that way. It's not
Yeah.
the case.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like everything else. There are bad people in every facet of our life.
Yeah.
And fortunately, the majority of people are great people and are trying to do good things.
Yeah. I
It's
agree.
unfortunate that some of these bad people, the few that are out there, spoil it for all the others. You know?
Mm-hmm. I agree completely. Is there anything that, looking back, that you I don't know, I think I might have asked this in a different way before, but I'll ask it again. Anything that, as a child, that you wish you could go back as a kid and learn ahead of time before you engage in this process? I always think, man, I wish I would have known that when I was 12, because I would have been able to do X, Y, Z better. I wouldn't have done blah blah blah.
The other thing I look back on and what I did better on was trying to figure out women and girls back when I was younger. Maybe I would have, not made so many mistakes in my life.
Yeah.
that's that's the only thing. I mean, I don't I don't regret any of my life,
Yeah.
not any of it, and I don't put blame on anybody in my life for my plight. I don't have a negative thought about my mom and dad, and I don't blame them for any of that stuff. They had some, really, really tough choices, knowing what they were going through and the decisions they had to make. Now, it's not their fault, and the nuns were strict. But you know what? I can't even imagine having to take care of 50 rambunctious boys at the
Yeah.
same 24 by 7. I just even can't dream how would I ever put up with that. I couldn't do it. So I can't imagine how you don't. You can do it any other way other than being strict. I mean, if one of the nuns had tried to be real loving and emotional and hugging the kids, she would never accomplish anything because it'd be like bees to honey, or ants to honey.
Yeah.
Everybody would be all over her because, you know, I, I'll bet they were trained that they got to keep their emotions in check
Yeah.
in order to keep sanity when you're dealing with a bunch of young children that need a lot of love and attention.
Yeah. And
You got to
discipline.
be careful with how you do that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's for sure. Do you find that there are stories? That made me think of this question. Wasn't one of my on my list, but do you find that there are stories that you go back to often, to pull from as an experience to express an emotion or to convey a message that you have in your books?
Hmm.
Like I have a few life experiences myself where had such dramatic impact on my life, both negative and positive, that I use them as a metaphor very often for a lot of the stuff that I do.
I guess it depends on, if I'm talking to somebody and there's something that they're struggling with, there might be something that I can relate directly to, but in general, it's the whole orphanage story in itself, and not letting the challenges dictate to you how you're going to end up living your life. That you got to continue to focus on the positive stuff, continue to focus on learning and bettering yourself. You can't get trapped and dragged down by some of these negative feelings you got because you're in a tough situation. You got to keep looking at the positive stuff.
Yeah.
And on that, because and just look around and see that there's other people, other children, other families that are way worse than even you are. So, your life isn't that bad. It could be worse.
Yeah.
So that's the way I kind of look at life, and I try to encourage other people to kind of look at life too. Just, don't get yourself dragged down by your own thoughts or by having friends that drag you into that all the time. I mean, there's some friends that that can continue every time you get with them. They want to drag you into this stuff, and it's like, you got to be careful with that kind of stuff. You can get trapped and pulled down there with them.
Yeah, I agree completely. Well, that's awesome. Andy, thank you very much, sir, for taking 2 hours again of your day to come and spend on my stream, talking to my audience and myself, and helping to broaden our horizons a little bit. It's very, very difficult sometimes to convey our message normally, let alone in a book, writing as you do. And as we close, anything in particular that you want to tell folks? Maybe how to find your books? Are they available on Amazon, eBay, on a particular website or anything?
Oh yeah, here I'll let me switch the camera around again and show you. So if you want to, let me get further away here.
Yeah.
If you want to,
that's perfect.
On my website. That's my website, www.andyskrzynski.com. If you want to check out my books on Amazon, just do a Google search on Amazon, Andy Skrzynski. That'll bring up my author page on Amazon. And then from there, you can go look at each of the individual books.
Yeah, awesome.
If you go look at my website, you're going to find a lot of information about my books. And you can click on buttons in there that's readily available to go to Amazon to check out each of those books themselves individually. But you're going to find out some inside stories to my writing. And actually, I mean, for people that think about writing, on the very first homepage of my website, you go all the way to the bottom, I got a little button there that goes tips for authors. And so I've got several pages of tips for writing that I learned over my experience. So anybody that's on Facebook, if you want to go to Andy Skrzynski's author page, you can ask to join there, and then I just approve those because it's a private group. So hopefully that helps you out. Is there any other questions?
Yeah, no, that's great. I think the big thing for folks that want to get involved and that want to, pardon me, do some research is just the ability to know where to look and to look deeper into the information if they want it. Thank you very much, and I will as well post this on my Twitter. I've already posted your name and stuff on there, and folks can easily go back and have a look. As well, a member of my audience has clipped that segment out of my stream as well, so that if people want to reference it and look back at the information, they can easily do that as well. So,
was there any questions that anybody had? I guess we didn't cover too many questions from the audience.
No, any questions they had, I threw them in as we went, so that it felt seamless.
Okay.
So
very good.
Yeah, no, the information is good as always. Appreciate it, Andy. What I would say, I think if I'm going to go back onto your Facebook page, I'm going to do some research there, and I think we may want to do a follow-up to that as well. I think that's a great piece of a great nugget of information I'd love to dive deep into as well that I personally haven't spent enough time in. So I'd love to have
cool.
you
Yeah.
back in a
Yeah. You
couple
know me.
months.
I'm open. I like chatting.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Well, tell your wife I said thank you very much for allowing me to steal you
I'll
for such
do
a
that.
long time
Say the
this
same
afternoon.
thing. Tell your wife the same, and I appreciate the time that you've allowed me to share this with your audience as well.
No problem. And what?
So I just and I wish you lots of luck working with the children that you're working with.
Thank you very much, Andy. I will be putting this on YouTube, and when I do, I'll send you the link through email. Okay, bud?
Super. All
Awesome.
right. You
And
take care.
yeah, thank you very much. You can just hang up the call. No problem, Andy. We'll talk to you in a little bit, bud.
All right. Bye bye now.
Bless you. Bye for now. Oh boy, thank you. That was awesome. Thank you guys for hanging out today and for being pardon me, being a part of the stream with Andy. Andy's quite an interesting fellow. He has intrigued me more than once with his stories and his conversation. He's got quite the journey that he's been on. You know, he's gone through a lot of different life experiences. He's been through some struggles. Let's put it that way. So it's always good to hear how he's overcome and gone through the different things. How are all you guys doing? Don, Batman, anyone else that's left that hasn't bugged off because you thought I was canceling the stream or ending the stream there? But either way, Don, I appreciate you putting the link in there. What is that link? That was just the Zoom link. Little Pretty 02. What's up, Little Pretty? Uncle Jim, Don, everybody. Don, what was the... Oh, it was the clip that you put in there. Why do they time out your clip? That's so weird. Andy Supreme. Nice. Thanks for clipping that, Don. I really appreciate that, buddy. I'll have to figure out why it timed you out, though. I thought you did, too, Little Pretty, not going to lie. I welcomed you to the gym and everything. All right, Batman, take it easy, man. Thanks for hanging out with me and Andy today. It was good. Yeah, Don, you brought up a good point with the chat command there. I never even thought. I always forget that that's an option, although I do it on other streams as a mod all the time. It's just jealous. Yeah, no surprise. I always forget that I have that ability to go in and make a command that says, hey, you want to know who my guest host is? So that might be something I can regularly do, go in and just put in guest or something to that effect. What were the words that you used? I liked what you typed in. Where was it? Where was it? Monsieur Don. Oh, host and guest. Yeah, maybe I'll just put guest. I think that would be a good one. But Batman, I will be in touch if you're still here. If not, I'll whisper you and we'll figure it out. I have several Windows 10 keys that I would happily share with you, so completely free of charge. But Little Pretty, how's everything going? Are you guys at home today, or are you guys working? What are you guys up to? Is Canada still completely locked down? Because you guys are Calgary, if I'm not mistaken, right? That's nuts, man. Canada's... I don't want to get into politics, but I ain't happy. You know, with my wife and I looking to come back to Canada in a year or two, not permanently, but on a semi-transient basis, having two homes, one here and one in Canada. You know, I'm really disappointed with the state of Canada at the moment. I'm not a fan. I'm just going to say that. So, do you guys normally work from home, Don, or are you guys Oh, Edmonton, that's what it was. Well, not Calgary. That's crazy. That drives me boo flames. That drives me absolutely bonkers. I've said it before on stream and in other platforms. It's been a year since I've seen my father. And my wife hasn't seen her family either. And I mean, her dad is in his 80s. My dad isn't quite that old. He's in his 60s, but that's a whole freaking year, man. Of we can't even cheat in just sneaking him over to my dad's house and pretend like we're not locked down. Yeah. You use my exact phrase. Can't even sneak her in. I can't even because the border. I live in a different country. I can't even cross the border without risk of losing. It just sucks. It really is horrible. Yeah, I'm literally I'm jailed in a country even. Yeah. Anyways. Yeah. This is the first Christmas in years we're not going to be able to go home. It's been 11 years we've been in the States now. We're in our 12th. This is but the 11th Christmas where we're not going to be able to get home. Well, let me back that up. A first Christmas in 11 years where we're not going to be able to go home and be with family. And it's my kids are pretty upset. I can tell you right now, Don, ain't no way in hell anybody putting a chip in this body. I will go down fighting. No way. I will find another way. I'm being patient and what's the word? Obedient at the moment. Keywords at the moment. I because of my position in the community and the population that I serve, I bite my tongue. But there may come a time when I may not be as patient or obedient. Working in a nonprofit in an executive director position as I do, I have to be very careful what I do and say and those sorts of things. That's why doing streams like this it's hard. I speak my mind, but I don't often fully flesh out my full thoughts because it can get me in trouble sometimes. So with my donors and my supporters and all that kind of stuff, I hate to say it's a political position. All my donors are great friends. I love them to death. I mean, that's the beauty of my work. My donors aren't just random people. I've gotten to know all of my donors and those who give to me, not to me, to this organization very well, to the point where they will step out of bounds for me easily to take care of. Yeah, absolutely, Don. But at the same time, if I speak out openly, they have businesses and stuff to take care of as well. And our current political climate in both countries is such that, you put your neck out there, somebody's liable to take a swing at it. And if they're swinging at you, they're likely to then turn to your supporters. And that's something I don't care about me. I care about my staff and I care about those who support the kids that we serve. And I don't ever want to put them at risk, right? So I just play nice with the other kids. And when the time comes in the future, if need be, hopefully never, but if the time comes, I will gladly step into the fray. But all right, I got a skedaddle. Don, Little Pretty, Batman, everyone. Thanks for the follow, Little Pretty. Jamie, thank you for the follow or the raid as usual. Big Pretty, follow today. You are amazing. Little Pretty, don't call me a champion. Well, you know what? The funny thing is, my name means champion. I'm not going to lie to you. Neil means champion. So I kind of am a champion. Brenny for the resub, 12 months today. I love every minute of that. 12 freaking months. That's so awesome. MLA came in with 400 bits today. Yeah. I love it. I love when you guys support the channel. I love because knowing when you support the channel through subscriptions and bits and donations and all that kind of stuff, you actually are donating to Rise Above. Because unlike regular streams, when you guys do this stuff, it's not to support me. It's not doesn't go into my bank account. It goes into Rise Above's, and it supports a very worthy cause, which is the students that we serve, and everybody gets to benefit when our kids succeed. So. Yeah, I appreciate it. Okay, guys, I'm going to take off for the day. Little Pretty, Big Pretty. You guys are amazing. Stay warm. I know in Edmonton it's got to be chilly because it's right now it's -10 in Michigan, so it's got to be chilly where you guys are at because you're just a smidge farther north than I am. So either way, everybody, have a great afternoon, and we will see you next time. Appreciate all of you more than you'll ever understand. Bye for now, guys.